Yeah, Michael Shermer, who founded the Skeptic Society and is the editor of Skeptic Magazine, who has had, I think, Jordan Peterson and other people guest edit it. So he is not the best. When the skeptic community sends their best, this is not who they send.
Mm-hmm.
Michael Shermer will get into some of his history that is relevant to the ahistorical little thought experiment that we're about to hear from him.
Yes, he here is speaking with historian Mary Graybar, and they're talking about Thomas Jefferson, specifically his relationship with the slave that he owned, Sally Hemings. Now, look at how much he projects his own horniness and weird sexual depravity onto this story.
Let's just take the scenario that that he did father a child with his slave, Sally Hemings.
He did.
So So it's not a scenario. This is a documented fact, which was denied by the white Jefferson descendants for 200 years until DNA evidence forced them to acknowledge the truth. We'll get into that a little bit later. But anyway, go ahead, brother.
Yes, again, though, like, because he is the center of the universe, he identifies more with Jefferson in this instance, and he has to center his perspective.
But like any skeptic who would cast doubt on the validity of what the Hemings family has said about that we descended from Thomas Jefferson is being anti-scientific and basically
it's been proven.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
and also, like, you should have probably trusted the oral histories for the 200 years. But anyway.
Yeah, but if it's not a white man, I don't give it credence. Continue.
Let's just take the scenario that that he did father a child with his slave, Sally Hemings. If I recall chronologically correctly, his wife had already died, right? His wife died even before he was president.
He was so lonely.
Right. So let's just put a charitable spin on it, because by all accounts, he was a good guy. What if his wife dies, he's lonely, he falls in love with Sally Hemings, and they have a child together? Why is that not like a progressive thing? Like, this is, this was against the law, right? And he's breaking the law because he loves this woman, and they have a child together. There's no birth control, whatever, it just happens. So he then takes care of her and the child and so on. Why not elevate him even higher for this instead of calling him a rapist? What do we know is in his mind? How do we know what kind of relationship? We don't. No one knows.
Pause.
So people are just throwing.
How do we know what kind of relationship we have? We know that he was the master and she was the slave. We also know that she was 14 years old when they started their, I don't know what Michael Shermer wants to call it. I would call it the rape relationship that they had.
Yeah.
So we actually know with some degree of philosophical specificity what their relationship was.
You know what we also know? That she had the inability to say no.
Right. We know that. We don't know what was in his mind. I don't really. I guess.
Who gives a shit?
Well, that's the thing, is we kind of know what's in his mind. We know what could not have been in her mind, or she would have faced severe retribution. Which is like, I'm going to resist this. Anyway, continue, Bradley.
I'm even higher for this instead of calling him a rapist. What do we know is in his mind? How do we know what kind of relationship? We don't. No one knows. So people are just throwing these things out, again, as a calumny, as part of a larger ideological agenda that really bothers me, because I admire him very much, Jefferson.
Oh, I'm so
and of course, no one's perfect, but judging people by today's standards, and often standards that were established last week of what's right and wrong, and just going back a few decades and condemning people for what they said or wrote, in the 1950s or something. It's just inappropriate, I think, much less 200 and something years ago, to assess what somebody was thinking at the time.
Oh, she's so uncomfortable. His compulsive desire to romanticize this relationship says way more about his desire to, like, keep this mythology alive about Thomas Jefferson than anything. And I also just want to point out how his understanding of what's progressive is so incredibly shallow there, right? Because it involved a black woman and a white man. We should be lauding this. It's progressive, right? Like, how are you involved in history or academia or understanding of culture and don't identify that perception of what is progressive and what is not as aesthetic and silly as it gets?
An important context here is that Michael Shermer is credibly accused of rape. There's a BuzzFeed piece, 2014. Will misogyny bring down the atheist movement? There's been subsequent reporting since then. He denies it, but I'll just say as somebody who followed one of the accusers prior and during this whole thing, and I'd say her reluctance on top of her credibility, I would say I am, for one, believe the accusations and believe that that's why this is, Shermer is probably motivated a little bit by that when he speaks of calumnies against people that supposedly admires. And I don't know, Bradley, if you've seen sound polls, I have a clip of 1999, I think it's C-SPAN, covering the DNA results that proved incontrovertibly that Jefferson did in fact rape his slaves, and then denied it, or didn't deny it, but just didn't comment on it, and then allowed his family members to go through 200 years of white supremacist denial, just to get a little sense of how this was greeted. If he was being progressive, his descendants wanted no part of it. Let's just say that.
But not every one of Jefferson's descendants is as thrilled as the Hemings about the news from the DNA labs. Robert Gillespie is president of the Monticello Association, a group of 800 white descendants of Thomas and Martha Jefferson, and he is uneasy about bringing the Hemings family into the fold.
We want them to tell us what additional information they can produce. We want the foundation to submit what historical information they can produce. We'd like to see if Dr. Foster and geneticists might be able to come up with more sophisticated DNA testing that can also give us more information.
Not all the members agreed. Lucian Truscott IV won his battle to invite the Hemings to the reunion.
Okay. This is their land. Just like it's your land. It's their land. And that graveyard is their graveyard just like it's mine. Just like it belongs to me. They're descendants of Thomas Jefferson.
The Truscott is in a minority. The association is intensely proud of its tradition and guards it carefully. John Hubbard is a retired teacher whose father and son are buried here.
Well, I think the black community doesn't have much of a heritage. Their heritage goes back probably to about the Civil War and not much beyond that. I think that it's very important to them to establish this link because it gives them a heritage that otherwise isn't there.
But the reunion has...
So there's those progressives, right? Like they're just doing this because they want a heritage. Where the clip goes on, someone saying like, I have no interest, a black woman, I have no interest in being buried in that graveyard, but I don't think you have the right to deny me it if the requirement is lineage. So.
Well, I mean, it's way more important to maintain everyone's like historicized and, whitewashed version of our founding fathers than it is to be historically accurate. That's why we can't tear down Confederate statues, but we also can't acknowledge like the actual true breadth of history, of like the atrocities committed by our founding fathers. It's a very selective responsibility to teach history in this country. But I mean, to their point, it is kind of, I don't know what you'd say, it's kind of what we're taught generally speaking. I mean, I don't know how this is not any different, but I've seen Hamilton. I don't remember all of it, but I've also seen, but I recall there being like some sort of weird Sally Hemings striptease in the middle of it or something. And then he just sings a song about like, if that was, I just might have been a fever dream. And then like they sing a song about like just saying no or something. And
yeah, that's like Hamilton's the tryst he has with another woman. He cheats on his wife with another woman.
Anyway,
that play is like that play sucks. I'm sorry, I haven't even seen it, and I've already decided. But keep going.
Let's see.
All right, while you're looking it up, Matt, you can jump in. Bender.
Oh, me? Yeah, I mean,
yeah. It says that it was Sally Hemings. So I feel good online, but yeah, there's obviously a range of revisionism, but like when it comes to like acknowledging the moral complexity theoretically of our historical forebears, like in this country, we don't really do that. We just sort of like play this game of like, well, they did some good things and some bad things, but because it led to America being founded and being here, it must all have, been worth it at the end.
Oh,
well, they also claim that it's not bad because back then it wasn't bad, even though like that's like the rules of the time are the rules no matter what. Like it doesn't matter what we know later on to be wrong. If they didn't know that at the time, then it's totally cool. There's no like, morality or anything like that in terms of like knowing right from wrong, regardless of what the rules said. If the rules said it, it was fine. Go for it.
They definitely knew slavery was wrong back then. They were talking about it all the time.
White communist. Sally Hemings lived on a slave labor camp run by Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson fathering a child with Hemings is comparable in every way, with Amon Goeth depicted in Schindler's List fathering a child with a Jewish prisoner in the Nazi slave labor camp.
Yes.
The culture and ideology of American whiteness, the actual prototype to German Aryanism, is utterly repulsive in its denial of reality. I agree.
Yep.
And I think there's also like this complete cognitive dissonance where Americans feel like they don't have a worshiping of kings culture because we are separate from the United Kingdom and England in the way that our country was founded. And yet this, like the Hamilton musical, the way that we deny the atrocities of a man like Thomas Jefferson, very similar.
Well, I mean, this is Michael Shermer, a guy who's supposedly a skeptic, doing his work to protect mythology.